The Lord of the Rings. How Middle-earth shaped a prime minister's soul. What happens when a fantasy epic becomes a political Bible? J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings isn't just literature. It's a transformative force that has shaped worldviews, inspired movements, and literally guided the political philosophy of Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. This isn't just a story about hobbits and wizards. It's a blueprint for understanding power, identity, and the eternal struggle between tradition and modernity that continues to reshape our world today. The journey through Middle-earth becomes even more fascinating when you realize that one of Europe's most influential leaders considers these books our Bible and credits them with fundamentally shaping her conservative worldview. Prepare to discover how an Oxford professor's fantasy masterpiece became the secret weapon of modern politics. The epic that changed everything. Plot and world building. Imagine a world where the fate of civilization hangs on the courage of the smallest among us. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings unfolds across 3 volumes, beginning with The Fellowship of the Ring, where we meet Frodo Baggins, an unlikely hero thrust into an impossible quest. The Hobbit inherits the One Ring, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron to control all other rings of power, and must destroy it in the fires of Mount Doom, where it was created. This isn't just adventure fiction. It's a profound meditation on power and corruption. The ring represents the ultimate temptation, absolute power that corrupts absolutely. Even the wise wizard Gandalf and the noble elf lady Galadriel refuse to touch it, knowing it would transform them into the very evil they fight against. Only hobbits, with their simple desires and natural resistance to grandiose ambitions, can bear this burden without being immediately consumed. The Fellowship, composed of 4 hobbits, 2 men, an elf, a dwarf, and a wizard, represents unity across racial and cultural boundaries, working together against a common threat. Yet, this unity proves fragile. Boromir, driven by desperation to save his people, attempts to take the ring by force. The Fellowship fractures, forcing Frodo and Sam to continue alone while their companions fight in the growing war. The Two Towers reveals the true scope of Sauron's threat as armies of orcs, trolls, and corrupted men march against the free peoples of Middle-earth. The stakes couldn't be higher. Total domination or complete destruction. Aragorn emerges as the rightful king of Gondor, while Gandalf returns from death with greater power. Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam navigate the treacherous wasteland of Mordor, guided by the treacherous creature Gollum, whose obsession with the ring mirrors the corruption it brings to all who desire it. The climactic return of the king weaves together multiple storylines as Aragorn claims his throne, the forces of good make their final stand at the Black Gate, and Frodo reaches Mount Doom. The resolution is both triumphant and bittersweet. The ring is destroyed, Sauron is defeated, but the victory comes at tremendous cost. The age of elves and magic ends, giving way to the age of men, a world more like our own, where heroism is quieter and magic has faded. Characters as archetypes. The heroes. Giorgia Meloni admires the characters Tolkien created have become templates for understanding leadership, sacrifice, and moral courage, qualities that profoundly influenced Meloni's political identity. Each major character represents different approaches to power and responsibility that resonate with contemporary political philosophy. Frodo Baggins embodies the reluctant hero who accepts an impossible burden not from ambition, but from necessity. His journey from comfortable complacency to world-saving sacrifice mirrors the political awakening that Meloni herself experienced. Frodo's transformation from an innocent hobbit to a ring-bearer forever changed by his experiences reflects how true leadership requires personal sacrifice and permanent transformation. Aragorn represents the rightful ruler who must prove himself worthy of power through deed rather than birth. His long exile as a ranger, protecting people who don't even know his true identity, embodies the kind of service before self-leadership that appeals to Meloni's vision of political duty. Aragorn doesn't seek power. He accepts it as a burden and responsibility, using it to restore rather than to dominate. Gandalf the Grey, and later Gandalf the White, serves as the wise counselor who guides without controlling, influences without dominating. Meloni has specifically referenced Gandalf in her political imagery, posing with a statue of the wizard during her time as youth minister, suggesting she sees herself in this role of moral guide and protector of traditional values. Samwise Gamgee represents perhaps the most crucial archetype, the faithful companion whose loyalty and simple courage ultimately enables heroism. Sam's unwavering dedication to his friend and his mission, despite facing seemingly impossible odds, embodies the kind of grassroots loyalty and determination that populist leaders like Meloni claim to represent. The villains are equally instructive. Sauron represents distant, impersonal power that seeks to control and dominate. Saruman shows how even the wise can be corrupted by the promise of power and progress. These antagonists embody what Meloni sees as the threats facing traditional society: globalization, technocracy, and the loss of local identity. Tolkien's deeper themes: tradition, identity, and resistance. The themes that make The Lord of the Rings so politically potent go far beyond good versus evil. Tolkien's work is fundamentally about the tension between tradition and modernity, the value of local identity against globalizing forces, and the importance of preserving what is good from the past while facing an uncertain future. The concept of the Shire represents everything Tolkien, and by extension, Meloni, values about traditional society. It's a place where everyone knows their neighbors, where customs and celebrations mark the seasons, where simple pleasures and honest work define the good life. The Hobbit's resistance to change isn't mere stubbornness. It's a recognition that some things are worth preserving against the forces of industrialization and modernization. The environmental themes throughout the trilogy speak to concerns about industrial progress destroying natural harmony. Saruman's transformation of Isengard from a garden into a machine of war parallels modern anxieties about technological development overwhelming human-scale communities. The Enta's attack on Isengard represents nature's rebellion against industrialization, a theme that resonates with various political movements seeking to preserve traditional ways of life. The notion of hereditary kingship and natural hierarchy runs throughout Tolkien's work, challenging modern democratic assumptions. Aragorn doesn't become king through election or conquest, but through birthright and proven virtue. This appeals to conservative political philosophies that emphasize natural order, traditional authority, and earned leadership rather than popular mandate. The concept of deep time and cultural continuity permeates every aspect of Middle-earth. Elves remember thousands of years of history. Dwarves maintain grudges across generations, and the Shire's genealogies stretch back centuries. This emphasis on historical continuity and cultural memory directly opposes modern tendencies toward rootlessness and constant change. Giorgia Meloni's literary obsession, a political Bible. For Giorgia Meloni, The Lord of the Rings isn't entertainment. It's a foundational text that has shaped her entire worldview. She has stated that Tolkien could say better than we can what conservatives believe in, suggesting that the fantasy epic articulates her political philosophy more effectively than traditional political theory. Meloni has described the series as our Bible and has nodded to it throughout her political career, indicating that her relationship with Tolkien's work goes far beyond casual fandom. This isn't a politician opportunistically adopting popular culture references. This is a leader whose fundamental beliefs were forged in the fires of Middle-earth. The personal dimension of this influence becomes clear when examining Meloni's political trajectory. Her rise from youth activist to prime minister mirrors the hero's journey that Tolkien's characters undertake, beginning in comfort and obscurity, facing increasingly difficult challenges, and ultimately accepting the burden of leadership not from ambition, but from necessity. In 2008, when she served as youth minister, Meloni posed for a magazine photo next to a statue of Gandalf, making explicit the connection between her political identity and Tolkien's wise wizard. This wasn't mere photo-op symbolism. It was a declaration of the moral and philosophical framework guiding her political vision. The far-right's Tolkien. Appropriation or authentic reading. The relationship between Tolkien's work and far-right politics in Italy reveals how literary interpretation can become a battleground for competing visions of society. The Lord of the Rings has influenced Italy's conservative movement since the fall of Mussolini, with fascists flocking to movements that found inspiration in Tolkien's traditional theme. Neo-fascists in Italy have adopted the series as a potent symbol of their beliefs, interpreting the struggle against Sauron as a metaphor for resistance against globalization, multiculturalism, and liberal democracy. This reading sees the Shire as representing traditional European civilization under threat from foreign invasion and cultural dissolution. However, Meloni's interpretation appears more nuanced than simple fascist appropriation. Her focus on Tolkien's themes of duty, sacrifice, and service suggests a more complex engagement with the text's moral framework. Rather than using Middle-earth as a justification for hatred or violence, she seems to draw from it a vision of conservative governance based on protection of traditional values and resistance to rapid social change. As a lifelong fan, who was first in line for last year's exhibition on him in Rome, Meloni's engagement with Tolkien appears genuine rather than purely instrumental. Her appropriation of the fantasy epic represents an attempt to ground modern conservative politics in literary and moral foundations that transcend mere policy positions. Literary influence on political practice. From Hobbiton to Rome, the translation of literary inspiration into political action becomes visible throughout Meloni's career and governing philosophy. Her approach to leadership reflects many of the qualities that Tolkien's heroes demonstrate: reluctant acceptance of power, emphasis on duty over personal ambition, and protection of traditional communities against external threats. Meloni's populist appeal mirrors the Hobbit's everyman heroism. Just as Frodo and Sam succeed through determination and moral courage, rather than special powers or noble birth, Meloni presents herself as an ordinary Italian fighting for ordinary values against elite interests. This Hobbit-like resistance to grandiose claims and pretentious authority resonates with voters who feel overlooked by traditional political establishments. Her policy positions reflect Tolkien's environmental conservatism and skepticism toward rapid technological change. While not anti-progress, Meloni's approach emphasizes preserving what works, rather than embracing change for its own sake. This mirrors the Shire's cautious approach to innovation and the broader theme of protecting traditional ways of life against forces of modernization. The emphasis on national identity and cultural preservation in Meloni's politics directly echoes Tolkien's celebration of distinct peoples and cultures. Just as Middle-earth is enriched by the differences between elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits, Meloni's vision of Europe celebrates national distinctions rather than seeking homogenization through globalization. Contemporary relevance. Why Middle-earth matters in modern politics. Tolkien's enduring political influence reveals how fantasy literature can provide frameworks for understanding contemporary challenges. The themes of The Lord of the Rings, the tension between tradition and change, the corruption of power, the importance of local community, the necessity of sometimes impossible sacrifice, remain as relevant today as they were when first published. The appeal of Middle-earth to politicians like Meloni suggests a hunger for moral clarity and heroic purpose that contemporary politics often lacks. Tolkien's clear distinctions between good and evil, his celebration of simple virtues, and his vision of leadership as service rather than domination offer an alternative to the cynicism and compromise that characterizes much modern governance. However, the political appropriation of Tolkien also raises questions about the relationship between literature and ideology. While Meloni finds conservative validation in Middle-earth, others read the same texts as critiques of authoritarianism, celebrations of diversity, and warnings against the concentration of power. The malleability of literary interpretation means that Tolkien's work can support various political visions, each claiming authentic engagement with the text. The Ring of Political Power. Meloni's quest continues. Giorgia Meloni's relationship with The Lord of the Rings reveals how deeply literature can influence political consciousness and public policy. Her journey from young Tolkien enthusiast to prime minister mirrors the hero's journey that structures the fantasy epic, suggesting that her political career itself represents an attempt to live out the values and virtues that Tolkien celebrates. Whether this represents authentic moral leadership or sophisticated political theater remains an open question. What is clear is that Meloni's success demonstrates the continuing power of literary imagination to shape political reality. In an age of technocratic governance and policy expertise, the appeal of leaders who ground their vision in moral and literary foundations suggests a deep human need for meaning and narrative in political life. The ultimate significance of Meloni's Tolkien obsession may lie not in the specific policies it produces, but in what it reveals about the role of imagination and storytelling in political leadership. Just as the Ring of Power in Tolkien's tale represents both the ultimate temptation and the ultimate test, political power itself becomes a measure of character and moral vision. In the end, Meloni's political career becomes its own kind of quest narrative, with Italy as her Shire to protect, globalization as her Mordor to resist, and traditional values as her precious ring to preserve. Whether this quest leads to heroic victory or tragic corruption remains to be seen, but the literary framework that guides it ensures that the stakes will always feel epic, the choices moral, and the outcome legendary. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more.